Hi, it's Kim Whaley with Simple Politics. We're going to try this again. For those of you who've seen it a little bit earlier, we had some technical problems, but really excited to bring on my guest today, Bruce Johnson, who is um, here he is. We got him. Bruce Johnson, who's a longtime anchor and reporter for CBS local. Hey, Bruce, we did it. I forgot to tell you that you can't do Instagram off of your computer. Who knew? Because it's only 2020, right? We should know these
But
things.
well, now we know that.
Now we know it. Well, anyway, we made it. And thanks for hanging in there with me. I was just introducing you, and I know you don't really need an introduction, but 42 years in the news business, 22 Emmys, also extraordinary, public service career, lots of accolades and awards from various universities, humble beginnings. You've written a book, and on top of it, had a massive heart attack and then ran a marathon. I mean, I'm really humbled, not only to be your friend, but to be able to switch things a little bit and ask you some questions today. So I want to thank you so much for being here. But what I was telling my viewers is, as you know, and because I've been on your show, we wrote a book about voting. And I think so much of our electoral process really does hinge on good information. And I'm wondering, have you seen things change in terms of how the media functions over the past 40 years? And what are the challenges today that weren't the case when you started?
Oh my God! I mean, changes upon changes upon changes. It's almost nothing like it was when I first came into the business, and a lot of that's good, and a lot of that perhaps is not so good. So we're trying to keep up with the changes. Um, I suppose if I had to underscore the biggest change, it would be that there's a lot more media now. You know, when I first came into the business, there was CBS, ABC, NBC, and maybe not even all three of those. I was still in undergrad school when I first got my job in the newsroom. And so television was king then. And, I always had to put this out, as a minority, dominated by white males, which was a big influence in terms of what we saw. A lot of what my community, what the things we thought were important, a lot of things that women, thought were important, weren't reflected in the day-to-day news. And I mean, God, we were shooting film, in the very beginning. Then came live television, and then came, fast forward, cell phones. I can go live 5 different ways with my cell phone right now. There was a time when I hit the field, I would go with a light man, a sound man, and a photographer. There'd be 3 and 4 of us, and had a lot of advantages to that. We had a lot of eyes out there then, and you had maybe one job as a reporter to do, and that is get the news, the information. Today, you got one person doing all of that, doing the research, doing the interviews, shooting the videotape, and also everybody's speaking social media. So there's less time, to do the research, to backtrack and, check everything, dot every I, cross every T, and so it's a lot more difficult. And so as a result, I think we're not as good. I hate to say it like that, because people are far more skilled, but we're not as good at getting the information out and getting accurate information and pursuing people and spending time sitting on stories and individuals. So everything's changed. Okay. One of the really good things, though, is because there's a lot more media, people who weren't represented now can be represented. On social media, everybody can be touched, every group. What's happening is people are going, to those news sources that they're most comfortable with. If you like what Fox is putting out, you go with Fox. And the president knows, who's there at Fox, and those are mostly his people, if you will. I'm speaking really politically there. And so you tend to regurgitate everything you hear there. If you like CNN, you go to CNN. If you like CBS, you go to CBS. So, we're starting to look like European press, You know what I mean? There's liberal, there's conservative, there's libertarian, as opposed to everybody trying to be objective. And, when you look back, Kim, we were never totally objective, were we? It was a question of what is the norm? And we were all buying the same thing in terms of what the norms were. I was the only black person in my newsroom when I started out in Cincinnati. That was for 4 years. No black editors, no black writers, no other black photographer. And so I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak. I'm putting out what I think they want, to be put out. And a lot of times I would swallow stories because they just weren't important. So a lot of that's changed. Not everything, but a lot of that's changed. So I hope that gives you some idea of how the business has changed. We could go on for an hour and just talk about that.
Well, when you talk about norms, I think that's important. That's a word we hear a lot. And as a lawyer, it's important to distinguish between a law and a norm. But when you talk about the news business, what is a norm? Like, what does that mean, a norm of self-policing? How, for example, today, could someone who wants the most accurate information decide if it's a blank slate? Do I listen to CBS? Do I listen to Fox? Or do I get on some online outlet? What role does a norm play historically in media that isn't the case across the board now?
I hear you. You have the same responsibility that you've always had, okay? Which means you read as much as you can, you do your own research. And it's all based on your culture. It's based on your history. It's based on your norm. I'm not sure there is a norm anymore because we're so diverse now. We weren't when I first came into the business, and certainly weren't before people like me came into the business, geographically, socially, racially, gender-wise. I mean, it's all different. So there isn't any one place you're going to go to get your thirst quenched in terms of what you know. We've got to be, we got to work at this in terms of getting information. I mean, newspapers are giving you far more information than, say, television. Some magazines, that have a narrow focus are going to give you far more information on that particular issue. So what do you want to know? How much information do you need? I think one of the things that's happening out here is that we're getting inundated in a lot of areas with so much information, and people are making up their minds based on a sliver of information. Maybe they don't need all the information, that's out there. So they go to where their comfort is. They go to where their values are. And I don't think there's one set of values anymore in this country. I don't think that there's one culture. And that's what I think we're grappling with here. And everything is partisan. Everything is partisan. And I think that has a big and a negative impact. I'm not sure we're as open to new information and different ideas. We have been over the years, and let me put it this way. I don't say we're not open. It just takes longer. It's gradual. Changing these norms and getting out of your comfort zone into somebody else's, it takes time. I think a good example of that is what's happening with Black Lives Matter now. It's becoming normal, maybe. I mean, private entities, news media are actually selling Black Lives Matter. They're selling spots, endorsing, Black Lives Matter, that sort of thing. And it wasn't that long ago. This was a fringe group. This was, a far left group. So things change and they change rapidly. The pandemic has had a lot to do with this also. So I don't know where we are. There is no norm anymore. It's like your normal versus my normal in some instances.
But what about misinformation, right? I mean, so I would think a journalist like a lawyer, the one norm I would think for a professionalism is to check your facts and to put out accurate information, which could be biased. I agree with that in terms of how it might be analyzed. And we know, at least from, the Mueller investigation and the Senate Intel Committee, that in 2016, lots of lies planted by the Russians. We know it's happening again. We also just know there's a lot of misinformation coming out of the White House, 20,000 lies. We saw a rally yesterday, one thing after another, just not true. I have students ask me this, Bruce, what do I do? How do I make sure it's not garbage in, it's good in? What do you tell young people who want good facts to make their own decisions?
Do your own research. And you just targeted and you've hit what the problem is. You know, in the past as a journalist, it was always respect the office. You would never accuse a president or maybe a senator, but not a president of lying out of respect for the office. You would say, well, this disproves or this. No. A lie is a lie. The truth is the truth. That should still be our focus. And if we stay true to the truth, and we all know what the truth is, not saying people can't have their own set. You're entitled to your own set of facts. You're not entitled to lies and making things up just because it serves your purpose at this particular point in time. So we know what the truth is, okay? We know when given, you know, an honest set of facts, we know there's science, and then there's my opinion, okay? And again, how much information do I need to form my opinion? I think that's a big problem here. A lot of people don't want a lot of information. They can't understand a lot of information. So they'll take two facts and they'll run with that. And facts change. That's another thing. So at any rate, you know, getting back to my point, I think we have to stay true to the truth. We have to be able to call politicians out. If it's a lie, it's a lie. And I think it's okay to say that's not true, that's a lie. And I think journalists have changed. I think journalists have gotten courage that they didn't have before. They were always respecting the office, maybe intimidated in some instances by who's holding the office. I think a lot of that's changed. Good manners don't always serve you well in the arenas that we're now playing and performing in.
Well, and you've covered, I would assume, lots of elections. What do you predict this fall? What are you hearing? What are you anticipating? That, again, I mean, this is a special time in so many ways, as you've just articulated, both in terms of bringing to social consciousness, you know, systemic racism in a way that I think, as you suggest, wasn't discussed as a fact, which now I think people are accepting. This is a fact, right? We're not going to debate whether that's a real problem in the United States.
At least most people are accepting this as a fact.
More so than before, yeah.
Right.
And I can speak for the, you know, more the people, Caucasian, white people, I think in general, just, okay, this is real. But then we're seeing really a push towards totalitarianism and really, really disturbing destruction of basic norms of accountability. What do you think is important for November 3rd? I mean, what are you keeping your eye on as someone who's lived through many, many presidents and many elections in Washington on the front lines?
I think we first have to get to Election Day, okay? I think there are going to be more surprises before we get to Election Day, just because that's how politics is. I think the presidents will have more than one surprise, if you will. And I won't put a value on that. I'm just saying, you know, Democrats better have their heads on swivels and stuff, because if you think this is going to be played out the way it was played out in 2016, you're probably wrong. You know, this president is very, very good at this, reality television, keeping the press, you know, guessing, that sort of thing. He believes that the more he's on television, he is his own best salesperson. So you're going to see a lot of him. And he's very good at using the power of the presidency. We haven't seen this in quite some time. You know, it's like, it isn't, can he do that? Which it seems like we're asking every day. Oh, he's already done that, and he's moved on to some other things. So, and I'll leave that the way it is. I think one of the things that I'm advising people on, don't expect Election Day to go down as election days have gone down in the past. Now, we've had hanging chads and that sort of thing, and we've had to wait a little bit to get outcomes in certain states. Voters should be prepared with everybody voting by mail. Not everybody, but most people. Don't expect to know, you know, November 3rd that night or early the next morning who won this thing. I mean, we may go to bed, for those who are going to go to bed that night. I don't plan to get any sleep. You may go to bed and one guy has won, and then you find out a day and a half later or 2 days later or even after that, no, wrong. We didn't say he won. We said he was leading. No, somebody else has won. Then the other, you know, claims that there was malfeasance, claims there was fraud. And so this could end up in the courts. I mean, we've been there before. It's going to be messy. And maybe every election from here on out is going to be messy. Who would have thought, Kim, some years ago, that we'd be having situations like Gore and Bush, you know, where, you know, one candidate wins the popular vote, and then we have to go to the Electoral College. And some people are saying, what is the Electoral College? What do you mean, you know, Gore didn't win? And so Now we kind of recognize, popular vote doesn't really matter. That's why the candidates are spending all their time in the swing states. And then it's like, well, what's a swing state? I kid you not, people still ask those kinds of questions.
Right, which is why I assume you do this great sort of Q&A spot in the evenings or on a regular basis for WUSA 9 here in Washington, because I've been on it a number of times where viewers will ask really basic questions and you give them clear-eyed, accurate responses, so people have something to hold on to. It seems like some form of information to hold on to.
You're absolutely right. And the thing that we've got to stop being as high and affluent, as journalists, and assuming, that people know all these things just because we've reported them over the years. Now, we need to come off of our high horses and realize if we're getting the same questions repeatedly, then a lot of people still aren't getting it. And they are the ones who are dependent upon us, television, broadcasting, to explain to them, because they're not going to the books. They're not doing, the big social media dive in terms of finding out what anybody and everybody else is saying. So it's our obligation to keep repeating it, learn how to explain it in a different kind of way so that people aren't surprised.
So do you think more people in your position should be doing that? I mean, I find I'm new to this business a little bit, but there's a lot of, sort of focusing on the latest breaking news, not doing as much of bringing the big picture into focus for people that you do, I think, quite uniquely. Is that something the media could do more of, or it's just a matter of people finding it for themselves?
A little bit of both. I'm not sure you can devote, and we devote that half hour, 7 o'clock, taking everybody's questions and digging and stuff. But we also want to continue to be the traditional kind of journalists. I'll give you an example. Like right now, the Federal Highway Administration is looking at 16th Street and Black Lives Matter Plaza, and 16th Street, like most roads in the country, built with federal dollars, and there are rules and regulations for the signage you can put, on a federal road, street, whatever. And the Black Lives Matter sign is in violation of all that. So it becomes a question, well, how long are you going to let them stay there? At some point in time, the businesses are crying, you got to open that road up. We are losing our shirts due to the pandemic, and that sign is not helping us. We got a garage that people can't get to because of that sign and where it's located. So they got to open the road, right? That was my piece last night on the Q&A. They've got to open that road eventually, but when? And who's going to make that decision? Does the mayor paint over the sign? In other words, remove the sign, police open that road, or the mayor needs some political cover here. She's got a problem with Black Lives Matter, okay? And she put the sign down there in her feud with the president. Or do you allow the Federal Highway Administration to come in and paint over the sign and open the road up? President might want to do that, but other people that I'm talking to with the Federal Highway Commission, they don't want to go near that political hot potato. So they're talking. And Kim, they're not even talking for the record. I'm hoping this afternoon to get an official statement from the Federal Highway Administration. But yesterday, nobody would even admit that they're meeting on this thing. Nobody would admit that the mayor has asked for an exemption, which he probably won't get, because you can't exempt D.C. because it's their road, and make every other road in the country adhere to a different set of rules and regulations. So it's a different time, it's a different place, and everybody's aware of the politics. But there are rules and regulations also. We're in the middle. We're in the journey. So just put the information out there. Let people know.
Well, and I think what your story highlights is something, again, that I teach law students, which is that a lot of these issues are thorny and complicated, and it's a lot of gray area and ambiguity. And we live in this black and white, polarized, I'm right, you're wrong, thumbs up, thumbs down, my team, your team environment. And a lot of these issues are complicated, and there's no clear answer, and you have to dig into the nuance in order to get a good outcome. And there are policy implications. So I was wondering on that topic, because you mentioned earlier the word values, which is so important to me personally, and I think it does bear on the work that both of us do. And as I said at the top of this conversation, you have an extraordinarily compelling story on so many levels. And I'm wondering if, looking back in your career and where we are right now as a country, what values do you think from your life are important for people to keep in mind right now, and to push us to a place where we're not so angry?
Here's something I care with me, and I say to every young journalist: don't judge. It's God's work. It's not our job to judge, to walk into situations. And you see it with not just young journalists, but with old journalists. Again, because of their culture, because they've been brought up, maybe because of their own political biases. They walk into a situation, they've written the story before they get there, okay? Shooting in the projects. The victim probably had it coming, or at least was doing something that you wouldn't do, and certainly your children wouldn't be in that situation. It's kind of like, before this mass awareness, a black guy is shot by police. Well, we're trained to believe that police law and order, we give them, the power, the authority to carry a gun, badge, and take a life if they have to. So you gotta side with police, and same with priests. I mean, it goes on and on and on. We're brought up this way, and we're taught this is the norm. This is the way you're supposed to be. And that's certainly the way I was trained as a journalist. It's the way I was raised, okay? We watched the same television programs. We read the same things. We went to the same schools, had the same history, that left out a lot of American history. So we're breaking all that down now. And social media has helped us. And I think that's a plus. We're breaking all that down now. There are bad cops. And a bad cop is like a pedophile priest. It doesn't take a lot of them to ruin it for everybody, for all the good cops. And what does that do to society when you've got a bad police officer who's shooting people in the back, and only God knows what he did before he was caught shooting somebody in the back? Same with the pedophile priest. By the time we caught up with them, I mean, their victims, they were just countless. They were spread all over the place. And institutions like the police department and the FOP and the church protected these kinds of people. So we're going to keep doing what we're doing. Nothing has changed. When I was a young reporter, we were sending the police chief, in Cincinnati, Ohio, to prison. The vice mayor padding his payroll. I mean, those are things wrong, and they're still wrong today, and they still go on. So basic journalism, what we do, that hasn't changed. What's changed is the technology. What's changed is there's more of us. What's changed is we're owned by corporations now, and not journalism corporations. So we become like a victim to the bottom line. What's it costing? What are we going to pay people? And you have to pay for talent. I don't care what business you're in, whether it be law, reporting, whatever. And they've got a number of what they're going to pay. So you're getting a lot of inexperienced or less experienced journalists that are learning on the fly. Okay, in the old days, you would learn on the fly in the smaller markets where you can make your mistakes, and where the managers were experienced people who just liked the quality of life in those small towns. They'd stay there and they would mentor you. In my case, Cincinnati was a guy by the name of Alan White, who's sat right next to me. And Alan White might have been a racist for all I know, but I know one day he told me, Bruce, I don't think you'll ever be a writer because this is not good at all. And so he was half right, because I became a writer, okay? But he was right in terms of what I was producing, what I was putting in, it wasn't good because I'd never been trained to write. I had to learn, the hard way, the long way, how to be a writer. So I had no backup plan. So it's not like I left and went to do something else. I stuck around and learned from him and all the others. Eventually,
and now you're a published author?
Yeah. When I came to Washington, Al White would come visit me and bring his grandson and point out, how he helped me. And he did help me, as did everybody else in that newsroom. But I forgot the question at this point, but
it was about values. Don't
judge. I think that is the worst thing we can do. Saw a lot of that when I was coming up in the business. We try to check that now. And what really helps in checking that is diversity. Okay, in my business, in the newsrooms. That's something that a lot of people don't want to deal with. And the reason why they don't want to deal with it, it's not so much that it's painful. And a lot of these conversations we're having now are painful, but you got to walk through this to get to the other side. But you also may have to give up something. You may have to share power, okay? Rather than have all white males sitting there at the board of directors. Well, we may have to take 3 of those positions and go find well-qualified minorities and women for those positions. And that's what we're talking about. We're talking about more competition. We're not talking about lessening any standards. We're just talking about more competition. I'll just say this and leave this subject. There was a guy who was an announcer, television announcer, golden voice, white male, Paul, and I forget his last name. He was in DC and then he went to Philly. He said to me one time over lunch, and I've never, ever heard a guy say something like this. He says, Bruce, I don't know if I could have competed today with all the competition that's out there from guys like you and women like this and that sort of thing. He said back in the day, it was just white males doing these jobs. Golden Voice, I'm the announcer. I do the weather. I'd anchor the news. I did it all. But diversity comes, and that means you got to share the power. You got to share, and you got to be better than what you were. And
well, I heard an
diversity can help
interesting
that.
statistic that kids under 16, less than 50% are white in America right now, which means when they become adults, that's just the way it's going to be. We can pretend that we can go back to the old days, but that is the diversity, and we will get these voices in. But I wanted to ask you as a last question, what are you working on now with this? You have, like I said, extraordinary career. What's next for you, Bruce? What do you want to do in your twilight years? And I know that you look 15 years younger than you are, but and what's your legacy of the many things?
One of the things I used to say to some of my mentors, Ed Bradley. Everybody knows Ed Bradley from 60 Minutes. Max Robinson was the first African-American network anchorman. He was the anchorman when I came to Channel 9. I got the chance to work with him for a few years. Jim Vance was a very good friend of mine. We used to have a dinner once a month, and just share our secrets and just talk men to men about, the business and personal stuff and everything else. And I used to say to these three guys all the time, make sure you write something down. Leave us with something, okay? And all three of these guys promised me they'd write something down, and none of them did, okay? So what I'm doing is trying to leave something, okay? I'm not going to call it a memoir or anything like that, but I'm working on a book. I got a really good team. I got a great agent. And we represent the country. My agent, Shoshana Christian, is a Howard University law professor, has her own literary agency. My editor is white, female, European, and so we make a really good team. And we've almost finished this book, okay? And we're shopping the book right now, and it'll probably somebody's going to buy this book. They're going to bid on this book, and so hopefully sometime next year this book comes out. So it's a combination of memoir, but it's not just about journalism. It's about that life you talked about. Never knew my father coming up. My mother was incredibly poor, but the first in her family to graduate high school at age 52. She got her undergrad degree from the University of Louisville. That's the stock I come from, And so a lot of help along the way. I mean, it's an American story. I'm not taking a lot of credit, but one time I was in the seminary studying to be a priest. A lot of people don't know that. And then I ended up covering, the church, wow, the good and the bad, So there's a lot of stuff in there, in this life. So you want to write, you want to leave something, and you talk about your mistakes. It's not a good book unless you can talk about your mistakes and who helped you and why you're still standing, that sort of thing. So, we'll see.
Well, great. Well, maybe we can have another conversation once that comes out. But I want to thank you. It's been a real honor, not just to know you, but to have you on today. And I know you're unbelievably busy. So thank you for
Thanks,
all
Kim.
that terrific insight and for this relationship. So
thanks for having me. You're the best. You're the best. We love you.
Thanks, Bruce. This is Simple Politics with Kim Wehle. We break things down, Bruce and I, for regular people. So catch us on WUSA 9, if not on here again. Thanks again, Bruce. Have a great day.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Bye, everybody.